There we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to PAL Spotlight, PAL Ottawa's Online Arts Festival, Spotlight 2021. My name is David Globerman, and I am the supporting cast coordinator with PAL Ottawa. I'm going to be your host tonight, and I'd like to welcome you to join us tonight. Our feature presenter tonight will be Carmen Harris, who I'm sure you've heard about and read about. Before we get started, I'd like to inform you, or just to remind you, that this presentation is being recorded and will be later posted on the PAL YouTube channel. I would also ask, and I think you've already done it, that you mute your microphone and unshare your video button as well, so there isn't a demand on the Zoom network itself. Also, please ensure that your cell phones are muted as well. There will be time for a question and answer period later on, and if you'd like to submit your questions through the chat line, that would be wonderful. You can submit them now, or maybe wait until the presentation is over. PAL Ottawa would like to extend its appreciation, acknowledge the generous support of the New Horizons program of the Department of Employment and Social Development Canada of the federal government that makes this entire arts festival possible. For those of you that are new to PAL Ottawa, PAL is an organization that provides arts workers 55 and over with affordable housing, which is very hard to find, not only in Ottawa, but really right across Canada in the major cities. It provides affordable housing and health and social supports in a caring and creative community. So this really keeps us busy with a lot of programming for our constituency. And to be a member of PAL, you don't necessarily have to be 55 and over, which I guess is middle-aged, unless of course you live to 110 years old. So middle age is probably a little bit less, but anybody can join PAL. There are a lot of benefits, and I would encourage people watching tonight, as well as your friends and colleagues, to check out our PAL Ottawa website for programming and a lot of other really good information on what's happening, not just in the arts community in Ottawa, but across Canada and actually across the world. Yeah, I would encourage you to check out our website, which is www.palottawa.org. That's www.palottawa.org. There are other PAL chapters across Canada, such as in Toronto and Calgary and Vancouver, and you can check those out as well, just to get an idea of what they're doing as well. Our feature presenter tonight, as I indicated at the top, is Ms. Carmen Harris. Carmen is a passionate performer of classical music and opera, musical theater, and just about any other genre she is hired for. Carmen has a Master of Music from the University of Ottawa and has sung with opera companies and symphonies right across North America and Europe, including work with the National Arts Centre Orchestra, the Winnipeg Symphony, the Chilliwack Symphony in British Columbia, and the Okanagan Symphony, also in BC. And Carmen wrote her master's thesis defense on Strauss Ophelia Lieder, or later. So without any further delay, let's give a warm welcome to Carmen Harris.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. It never gets easier to listen to your own accomplishments being read out in front of you while on camera, but I really appreciate that introduction. And today, I'll just give you a little walkthrough of what the plan is. I have some materials to present, and I'll be sharing my screen for a bit of performance, because unfortunately, as we mentioned before, there is no going anywhere. So this was not able to be a live performance of Strauss Lieder and songs by Andrew Ager, but we can enjoy them virtually. So today, we will primarily be diving really deep for me in on Strauss's Ophelia Lieder. And the things that get me excited as a performer, I have learned through my post-bac, my master's degree. It's always the little details that I find deeply interesting. So today I am going to be loading you up with little details that you had no idea possibly that relate to the Ophelia Lieder, how it was written, why it was written, and some of the interesting details of how Strauss takes Shakespeare's work and his text and really brings it to life in a very impacting way. So we're going to dive very deep on that. And then we have a little bit more of a delightful, lighthearted treat because the Ophelia Lieder is quite heavy, if I can say so. But we will be enjoying works from a living composer, which in my industry of classical music is very rarely done. Often we are making guesses at composers who have long passed on. And I have the very special treat to present 3 songs from a local composer right here in Ottawa named Andrew Ager. I'll get into it a little bit more about other things he's done and that we've done together, but they are 3 delightful little Shakespeare sound bites that we will enjoy to lighten the mood a bit. So I think the best place to start is a little bit about my process that I have been developing as an artist. And that always feels a bit strange to say. So I am 30 years old. I finished my master's degree in 2019, April of 2019. And in my master's, it became very clear that having an opinion was something that was not always able to be taught in school. As a musician, performer, you have excellent support in coaches who walk through the text with you. You go to diction classes of German, Italian, French, Russian, Czech, any language you need. You have wonderful, wonderful voice teachers who stop you every second note and say, I want the palate higher, I want a lower breath. All of these really good tools to make you an excellent or the best opera singer that you can possibly be. But I think one of the hard things to teach in an institution is, again, having an opinion. And having an opinion matters very deeply when we are on stage. I think as an audience member, a fellow audience member, it's the thing that we react to when a performer takes a breath or takes a pause and we feel like we're being held in the palm of their hand. You kind of lean forward on your seat a little bit. That is not very easily taught. And it's something all of us on the performer end are striving for. And for me, my journey of studies and learning with lieder, with art song, with opera, musical theater, jazz, you name it, that journey has shown me that research and diving in on the things that are deeply interesting is one of the best ways to have an opinion that's worth sharing with people. So I believe it was Barry before when we were chatting about his Shakespeare course, which sounds fascinating. I will be very, very upfront with you and honest and open and say that I come at this as a performer. I always want to do my due diligence. That means translating the work myself by hand, finding different words that can have different meanings for English. German has so many words that we don't have good representations of in our language. So when you're translating, that means putting multiple options down on the page. I also IPA everything, meaning using the International Phonetic Alphabet, so that I know how to say the words in the proper German way. And it also means really diving deep on the research. But as a singer, I'm interested in the things that the composers are doing with the words. So I love Shakespeare. I love his text. And I love Strauss. I love his compositions. But the little secret things that really just drove me wild for this song cycle are the things that I'm focusing on today. So as David mentioned, please do write questions in the chat, or if you have information that's interesting that we can discuss at the end, by all means, save it, write it down, write it in the chat, whatever you need to do. I'm so excited to explore this together. I think that's probably a fair enough introduction. So you know a little bit about me and my process. I will say that I am the firm believer that art song is wonderful staged. I know that some people may disagree with this, so I will be presenting the 3 Strauss Ophelia Lieder after we talk about them. I've recorded them with video and audio. They are a little bit more staged than not. And I think they just become very powerful when we can see the people in the room and see Ophelia going through the struggles that she does. So just be prepared that if you are very familiar with art song and the possible typical stand by the piano choir hands, this is not exactly that. So you've been warned. And now I think we can dive in. So I'm just going to share my screen here and get our presentation ready. Fantastic. Great, here we go. So it should come up in just a second here. Now, let's see. I'm just going to make this very large. If anyone can't see anything or there's a problem, do let me know in the chat or whatever. But what you should see, if it's all appropriate and proper, is just a sort of Shakespearean song page here. And I'll just zoom out there. Oh boy, 1 second, folks. Let's go to 100. There we go. So it should be okay. And if there is a problem, do give me a heads up. So Shakespeare and Song, this is going to be a presentation, like I said, primarily about Ophelia Lieder, and then diving in on some modern compositions, which, what a treat that we get to have those so often that you can't ask the composers their opinions, and now we actually can. So that's so great. I do know that probably many of you are very, very familiar with Hamlet, the story, and Ophelia's journey through that. But just in case, I've done a little, what would you say, a small Spark Notes style introduction, just so we all are refreshed on Ophelia, on Hamlet, and what the actual story is. So I'll just pull that up here. Perfect. Oh dear, I keep doing that. 1 second here. There we go. So a very brief breakdown, and again, Shakespeare experts, do not come for me that I'm not mentioning every single moment in this. I'm just trying to get to the juicy stuff with Ophelia. So Hamlet, in mourning for his father, King Hamlet, who died 2 months earlier, is visited by his ghost. The ghost King Hamlet reveals that it was his brother, Hamlet's uncle, and the current King Claudius, who murdered him. Hamlet feigns a break with sanity in order to enact revenge on his uncle. This madness affects many in Hamlet's life. He rejects his lover, Ophelia, hires a troupe of actors to reenact the murder of his father before the king, his uncle, and queen, his mother, and stabs Ophelia's father, Polonius, mistaking him for his uncle. And then Ophelia, whom we're focusing on the most, descends into madness at both the loss of her father and her lover, because Hamlet has spurned her, and drowns. Hamlet is sent away to England by his uncle, the king, but learns of an assassination plot against him. He returns to Denmark, confronting Ophelia's brother, Laertes, in the graveyard where Ophelia's funeral procession has just arrived. I put an oof there because it's terribly unfortunate that even in her death, this conflict is still arising. She's just been put into the grave. The dirt is being piled on her coffin, essentially, and they decide to have a duel. So a duel is set between Hamlet and Laertes. King Claudius, the uncle, conspires with Laertes to kill Hamlet, either with a poisoned rapier or poisoned wine, based on the outcome of the duel. The queen unwittingly drinks the poisoned wine and dies. Both Hamlet and Laertes are wounded from the poisoned blade. Laertes dies. Hamlet kills his uncle Claudius in his last moments and then dies as well. So I believe the only person alive to sort of summarize the story and tell the new king who comes in is Hamlet's friend Horatio. So it's just a terribly sad, very, very interesting play, full of drama, chaos, and emotion. And kind of the moral, I would say, that revenge in the end can be the destruction of someone more than what we would think. So not just going after the uncle, but so many others died as a result of this revenge plot. Really good stuff for opera and art song, as you can see, such good fodder. So as we continue, we are now going to get to know Ophelia a little bit better and understand why she was such a popular character to be set in beautiful paintings, sculptures, art song, more poetry based off of Shakespeare's plays. I call it the Ophelia Fandom, and it really took Europe and North America by storm at different times, and still does probably. I'm still fangirling over here. So Ophelia Fandom. Interestingly, as does happen with some of Shakespeare's plays, she only appears in 5 of the 20 scenes. But because her storyline is so impacting, much of Europe went through the Ophelia Fandom at different times. I think that her story is very impacting to people for different reasons, and also versus in each time, the reason that she was popular changed. So while it was an earlier time when Shakespeare first wrote this, Ophelia was very pitied and very, people saw her as innocent, sort of a victim of the circumstances, that she never had any power. She never had any chance. She was so heartbroken over the death of her father, so heartbroken over the loss of Hamlet, that of course she died. She was despairing. But that does change as we hit Strauss and his compositions, which we are going to talk about. So much of her representation through those scenes, those only 5 scenes in Hamlet, revolve around her relationships with the men in her life. Her lover Hamlet, her father, her brother, King Claudius even, and any other men that she interacts with. This to me makes it all the more fantastic that so many composers latched onto her story and were so deeply, deeply interested in her emotional struggle and sort of bearing the burden of becoming mad based on her grief. She just sort of unravels in front of us on stage, and people were so compelled by that, even arguably sometimes more than the violence and the rash decision-making and the revenge, the desire for revenge. Ophelia is the one in the story who is innocent and unfortunately pays the price for a lot of this revenge. Finally, Ophelia's story is featured by many composers. I couldn't list everyone here, it wouldn't fit in the slide, but Strauss, obviously, as we're talking about today, Brahms, Berlioz, Shostakovich. Thomas wrote a very interesting opera. He wanted a happy ending in Hamlet so bad, he used an alternate translation, I believe, by Alexandre Dumas, and it has Hamlet survive and live into golden old age, ruling Denmark happily and making sure the people are well fed and everyone gets a happy ending. I believe he tried to premiere this in Covent Garden, but was told that the English would not stand by such an ending to a Shakespeare play being so changed. So he had to then go back to his opera and change the ending back to the sad one. But apparently he was so stricken, he just really wanted Hamlet to live. And there are many more composers. There's a lot of contemporary composers as well who deal with Ophelia and write different songs about her death and the result, which is fantastic. So we'll keep going here. Now this is to get us set up for what we're going to see in the performance. Ophelia's musical mad scene. So before this scene, we've just talked about the plot very briefly for Ophelia. She's interacting with her father and her brother. Something I didn't say in the original synopsis is that both her father and her brother come in and warn her about Hamlet. Hamlet and Ophelia have been lovers. To what extent, it's not exactly clear. It is implied that they are most definitely lovers. What kind of physical love has gone on? Not completely sure, but it is very implied that possibly they have slept together, or at least they are in love. But it seems that Ophelia's brother, Laertes, and her father, Polonius, don't think that Hamlet is the right guy for her. There's a lot of political intrigue. Polonius obviously has more of an attachment to the current king, Claudius. So he could see Hamlet and go, I just don't think this is the right guy. They warn her. She's not very confrontational. She has a moment jest with her brothers, but she doesn't really take that too far. She's quite obedient when her dad says, hey, give him back the letters that he wrote you, all those love letters, say you're done, give it back. So she follows through and does those things. But later, you see that she is absolutely devastated that Hamlet has this sudden change. So when he is feigning madness, she is very distraught. And his plot and his feigning madness to get what he wants, where he scorns Ophelia and moves on, I think really absolutely does the damage. And then we reach the accidental death of her father. So Polonius is hiding in the queen's room, thinking he needs to protect the queen from Hamlet. Hamlet has, to people's eyes, gone off the deep end, even though that is not true. It's an act from Hamlet at this point. So Polonius is hiding in the room behind the curtain, making sure the queen is safe. Hamlet comes in and sort of starts to bicker a little bit with his mother and say, you know, how could this happen? This. And he hears Polonius yell out and mistakes Polonius for the king, Claudius, hiding, and stabs through the curtain, and Polonius is stabbed and dies. This sends Ophelia absolutely over the edge. So it's so funny that we only see her in 5 scenes, and yet so much despair happens to her, not of her own making. She is just trying to do what everyone is telling her to do, and yet look at the strife that has been caused for her when she's just trying to do the right thing. It's really sad. It's very interesting. I think in her mad scene is where we see her take back what little power she may have in this play. That is my opinion. But she walks, we can get to this slide now that you have that backstory. She walks into court, very dazed, very not focused. She's seeing people that she knows, that she has interacted with all her life, but she's not seeing them. She doesn't seem to be able to really connect with what people are saying. Even when they say things to her, she may respond, but the response doesn't seem to make sense. It's very disjunct. It's clear that Ophelia is up here thinking, and everyone else is watching her thinking, what is wrong with this poor girl? Even when the queen or the king actually directly address her, she just continues in this kind of reverie of things that are not of this world. She's seeing her father at one point on his funeral bed. She's thinking of Hamlet, even though Hamlet's not directly in front of her. She's just off, and she's not present with people. Her focus seems to come in and out of actual people. So there are moments in the text and the songs that we're about to share where it seems she's directly addressing someone in front of her and saying something to them. But what she's saying just doesn't quite make sense for the situation and what's at hand. You really see that people listen to her text and her song delivery and start to pity her, but also feel uncomfortable. Ophelia, the songs that we are focusing on now, Ophelia breaks the court etiquette with these 5 short little ditties. She sings about mistaken love, about the death of her father, death in general, and sex, which is absolutely taboo for young unmarried women, especially to say in front of the queen, in front of all these different people in the room. But she absolutely doesn't regard these rules, whether she is so far gone and so so in her own head, in her own madness, that she doesn't even regard the rules, or it is intentional. There are some scholars and people who are exploring through this, that they feel that there is intentional moments where Ophelia is saying things that are uncomfortable, perhaps accusing the queen, who, remember, the queen was married to Hamlet's father only 2 months before, when then Hamlet's father died, and she's back with the brother. Now she's with the brother and she's quite happy, and Hamlet is upset by this. So there are some people who say it's possible that Ophelia even mentions the things of taboo situations like love and sex that she should never talk about, to make the queen specifically uncomfortable. I am not a scholar, I am a lowly singer, but that was something very interesting to read when I was researching my thesis. So this is the scene. We have Ophelia in the room, but not in the room. She's there, but she's not there. She's gazing around her. She's remembering horrible moments of losing her lover, of losing her father, and it's just all coming together in a confusing blur. And Strauss takes all of this text and just makes something magical out of it that has uncomfortable moments that I think suit this scene of madness very well. So we are going to dive in to learn about Strauss, the rock star, and how he came to compose these pieces, which is a very funny story. And if we have any composers in here, you may really, really sympathize with Strauss and the problem he found himself laden with in a couple of slides. So Strauss, the rock star. Richard Strauss was a German composer, pianist, violinist, and conductor, as so many of these prolific composers were, born in 1864 and died in 1949. So he achieved star status throughout the world, mainly for his operatic and song compositions. That's just my familiarity. Some of the most famous pieces being Salome, Elektra, Der Rosenkavalier, the four last songs, and so much more. Think of your favorite Strauss piece. He's probably very well known for it. His compositions sold very well, making him quite popular with publishers, but publishers were not popular with him. There are some anecdotal stories that I was told by my coach back in Winnipeg. I did my undergrad at the University of Manitoba, and Laura Lowen, my coach and wonderful collaborative pianist, she was the head of the entire department at the school for collaborative piano. She used to say Strauss was the kind of guy who would go to the rock concert, perform the whole thing, and then have to sneak out the back because there would be so many crowds of people clamoring for his attention or his autograph, or wanting to give him a picture of themselves with a phone number on the back, say. So he was incredibly popular. And however we sum that up now, just think of it back a few years, and that's how popular Strauss was. Now, the problems with the publishers. Strauss and the unwanted contract. I found this the most hilarious thing I had heard when doing research on song cycles. It's such a well-documented story, so I'm going to share it with you now. Strauss was stuck in a contract with publishers Botha and Bach back in, I believe that's, 1906. The composer had given the rights of his next composition of 6 songs. He did this like years ago, didn't really remember that he had promised these things, sort of hoped they would forget too, and just went on his merry way and did his own thing. Especially when Salome came out in 1905, came out in 1905, it gained so much acclaim, and it was such, if you're looking for an opera that is joltingly out there, I would recommend watching that on YouTube. It is fantastic. The music is just shocking, and some of the stagecraft is equally shocking, but it just catapulted him to even more fame. So of course, writing art song in that moment, he was riding the operatic high. He wanted to keep going. He wanted to keep writing opera. And having this unwanted contract weighing him down and taking up his brain space was absolutely not ideal for him. So his solution was to simply ignore it. And ignoring that, maybe would have worked for some publishers, but absolutely not for these ones. They were quite insistent. Over a decade passed between, and they were writing back and forth, asking for songs, this and that. And then they started to get quite insistent. And I think they got very insistent with Strauss, and he got very annoyed and made a bit of a cheeky response here. So he enlisted the help of Alfred Kerr to create some satirical poetry about the tyranny of publishing houses, and sent the songs off to Botha and Bach. They were absolutely not impressed. They took Strauss to court and won. And finally, Strauss was dragged to the writing desk to put pen to paper and give us Ophelia Lieder, as well as 3 other songs in the set by Goethe, the wonderful German poet Goethe. I love this story, and it's so wonderful that this was well documented. There are little letters back and forth and some documents pertaining to the argument between these two groups. And interestingly enough, I found out even just, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, when I was just doing some more reading for this, that these songs did finally get published by another publishing house. So you can also go and look up his collaboration with Alfred Kerr and enjoy them together. They are definitely satirical and have some cheeky moments. I can understand why this particular publishing house did not want to publish them. It didn't paint them in a very good light, but thank goodness someone found it was funny. Perfect. So we are finally at the Ophelia Lieder being composed. 10 years, more than 10 years has gone by. It's been a fight, it's been a struggle. And the rumors are that even when he was writing this, Strauss was just kind of angry that he was being muscled into having to do this at all. He's frustrated, he's annoyed that he has to bother writing this for people he doesn't even like at this point. He's probably not getting the right amount of money. It maybe wasn't a good negotiated contract. He's just annoyed. So the idea that he's going to do his absolute best work here is probably not going to happen. There is some anecdotal evidence that he was actually thinking, I believe it was a personal letter or something that mentioned he was thinking of giving his Brentano Lieder to the group, which is a wonderful collection of songs, just to get the publishers off his back. He was thinking, I'll give them those songs. They've been doing, people love them so far. I've shown some friends. And then he said that he loved them so much and they were such good songs that he simply wouldn't give it to the publishing group because they didn't deserve good songs. So it is speculated that when he started out writing Ophelia Lieder, he was kind of hoping that it wasn't going to be a hit. But luckily, as we're going to find out, even if he was angry when he started composing these, I don't think it was possible for him to not be creative and bring his wonderful genius to these songs. They are markedly outside of his sphere. So if you're familiar with Romanticism, late Romanticism, and sort of the musical traits of Strauss, the Ophelia Lieder is quite shocking to the ears. I have sung them now, oh boy, in different performances, probably about 3 different sessions, and some of those performances were 6 nights, 7 nights. So I'm fairly familiar with these pieces. And when I first heard them, when I was looking for my master's recital, final recital, looking at these pieces, it's quite jarring to the ear. It's wonderful, great to be jarred, but it is surprising. So I wonder if some of you who have never heard these pieces will have the same experience that I had, because when I first heard them, I was very surprised. It's lush and romantic and yet very, very discordant and jarring. And we'll talk about some of those musical traits to listen for and maybe some of the guesses we have as to why Strauss did what he did. So luckily, the whole summary of that little side note is that even though he tried to be angry, he left us with some beautiful music. It's clear when listening that even if he wished a poor reception of these songs, they are full of unique, creative musical gestures that show Ophelia's descent into madness in a very different way from other composers. Strauss just couldn't help himself. Thank goodness, right? Awesome. So now, just to set us up for what we're going to hear. As I mentioned in a previous slide, many composers have been absolutely enamored with the character of Ophelia. We have opera, we have art song, we have jazz, like there's even pop songs about Ophelia. It's amazing how much Shakespeare just infuses our culture and what we love to listen to and the stories we love to hear. It's honestly fantastic. So turn of the century Ophelia is where things started to change. So we have two paintings side by side, and interestingly, these were painted most likely within several years of each other. It's a little bit difficult to really narrow down exactly when the picture here on the right was painted. But these are very, very different representations of Ophelia. And with these happening so closely, we're actually seeing how art and music and everything was changing with the turn of the century, and especially after the First World War. Now, Ophelia here on the left, her death is beautiful. We sort of see this delicate hand that is sitting so lovely outside of the water. She's got these beautiful wreaths of flowers in her hand. Her lips, even though her skin is quite pale, it's kind of that beauty of that pale skin and then the red lips, and she's still got her eyes open and is gazing off into the distance. This beautiful death, especially in young women, young, generally unmarried women, it's very common trope for opera and art song to also feature those stories, that their death was lovely and beautiful, and we paint them in this very charming way. Now, on the right, the fact that this happens even within, let's say, 20 years, if it's even that large of a gap, which I suspect it's not, even though we can't totally pin down that, we see Ophelia, bloated with the death of sort of sitting in the water, and her skin is of that pallor when she is passed on, and her hair isn't beautifully arranged as in the other one. It's stretched out, and even the way her feet is laying, it's not a charming picture. She's in her mourning clothes. It's really kind of the shift that we also are going to hear in Strauss's music. There's still the romanticism, it's still beautiful music, but things stretch farther. The composition is taken to a level, dissonance is used. The music doesn't resolve in a way that we find pleasing in our ears a lot of the time. It's just stretched and stretched and stretched. And society is kind of stretching at this time. So many things are changing. Now, these next two paintings, also very much so, showing how much art changed. So now this is, I believe 1905. And now all of a sudden, instead of such like very, very literal paint where we can really tell, they're laying in the water, there's the flowers. This one's a little bit more vague. And I think that's kind of the word that sometimes when I hear the music from Strauss in Ophelia Lieder, it is vague. We can't totally pin down why we feel unease or why we feel concern or, ooh, that doesn't quite go together. And that's kind of the intention of the whole art form at this point, is to just let you make those connections yourself rather than being so realistic in front of you. Very, very interesting. I am not an art historian. I just know that I love looking at the differences so that I can see that the differences in the music from what I've heard even 20 years before Strauss, it makes a lot of sense that the music is so dramatically different. So now we have hit Strauss's modern Ophelia. The turn of the century meant a lot of things were changing. Depictions of people and scenes became less literally defined, and music stretched its own tonal boundaries, pushing the limits of dissonance and musical resolution to express new ideas. Strauss's Ophelia Lieder differed greatly from his own late Romantic compositions, as well as typical settings of the text, like the set by Brahms, used to be incidental music during a play. This is important for later. Ophelia became a stronger female character, less retiring, less weak, as seen in Brahms's time, and no more beautiful death. Now the death is tragic, the death is real, and it's not pretty to look at. Death became realistic for people, no longer a beautiful, ethereal thing. Remember Brahms, because we are going to delve into how different his compositions are to Strauss's, because there is one key thing that Strauss does that was very radical in his time that his predecessor Brahms did not do. And it caused a bit of a stir in society. So remember that. Now we are at things to listen for. So we have been clipping along quite nicely. The first piece we're going to hear, Erstes Lied der Ophelia. These are some of the things that, as you're listening and watching the video, I think may be very interesting to you to listen for. So the meandering off beat repeated right hand piano melody throughout the very first piece serves to obscure the meter and feels almost otherworldly. It's like out of touch with the reality of who is in the room with her being Ophelia. This theme is ya da da dum da da dum da da dee 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 dee. You're gonna hear it repeated over and over again. You'll have it memorized by the end of this song. But Strauss uses it to almost make Ophelia seem even more disconnected from everyone she's surrounded by. It's very interesting. The relationship between the right hand melody of the piano and the left hand chording feels intentionally disjunct at times. So what the left hand is doing and the right hand is doing are not beautifully unified. They are very cleverly unified because Strauss intended it that way, but to our ears, they feel almost like separate characters. One is intoning and providing that bass line of chords while that melody is just wandering off. It's like when you're in a group and there's that one person who just has to explore everywhere else. And if you're the leader, the chaperone, you're constantly looking around for that one person who's way off in the forest, goodness knows where. And to me, that's exactly what the wandering right hand sounds like, is just that person who has to explore everything, who's never really part of the group. They're always doing their own thing. So the singer, the voice, often enters on weak beats in the music, which further confuses the meter and gives sort of a dreamlike feel to the text that's being delivered. It enters at unexpected times, but also the text itself, where she is, and we'll talk through the text in the next slide, but she's talking about a lover and saying, how will she recognize him? Oh, I'll know him by this trait and that trait, his sandal shoes, this and this. And it's like she's off in a dreamlike state. And remember, she's in public reciting this in front of a whole court. The queen is there, the king is there, and she's saying all these things. And really doesn't seem to care that people are listening to her have this whole recitation of exactly what her lover looks like and how she will know him. Then we have the dramatic dynamic shifts. Strauss makes wonderful use of dynamics. And I think for me, when I first heard this, this was my first shock moment, which happens a couple bars in the first piece. Out of nowhere, Ophelia just yells, dead and gone, my lady. And she's been dreaming about her love and how handsome she is, and just turns to someone and delivers it completely, loudly, boldly, brashly. It's quite shocking, and it's fantastic. So you have these juxtaposed soft piano dynamics and then shocking, very, very unprepared, loud moments. And what I mean by unprepared, Strauss didn't give us a chance to prepare, like a slow build crescendo where we know something big's going to happen. Oh no, you don't get that at all with his music. It bursts forth from Ophelia unexpectedly, and it's wonderful because of it. I think this further hints at that madness or that kind of unhinged feeling that's developing in her, because she's just responding to people who haven't even said anything to her. She's picking someone and yelling and going for it. It's very interesting. Finally, in this piece, the final page, the singer finishes their line, it meanders through chromaticism, and it does not resolve. The piano continues playing for most of the page, actually. And that same theme, ya-dee-da-dum, dee-ka-dum, dee-dee, ya-dee-dee-dum, da-ga-dum, dee-dee, keeps going, and then suddenly it slowly peters off until there's only one note that's being repeated and nothing resolves. We're kind of left with, it feels very open to me. I do this gesture because as a musician, that's what that ending feels like. It's just like nothing has been resolved. And any of the questions that Ophelia is asking of herself, of her subconscious, her soul is asking questions like, what now? I've lost my father and my lover. What's for me now? Who's coming for me? Who will help me? Whatever she may be asking in that time, the music certainly does not answer her in this moment. It's a wonderful ending. It's very striking. So that is the first song. Remember that, because we're going to be walking through, and now we're just going to look at a couple of these musical examples I told you, just so you know what to listen for. This is the theme I've been humming for you. Ya-di-ga-dum, di-ga-dum, ba-dum. And here is just an example of some of the entrances that change for the voice. So we have here, one rest and then the voice comes in. But then in the next bar where the voice enters again, we have a rest and an eighth. So nothing is so measured or so complete. It's like Strauss wants to keep us on our toes. As the singer, I can tell you that Strauss most definitely keeps us on our toes because it can be quite tricky to catch some of these subtle moments. But it is really wonderful with an ear. Now that you're armed with that education, you're going to hear a lot of these things we've talked about, and I'm hoping you'll enjoy it as much as I do. And now we're just going to read the poem of the first song, and then we'll carry on to song number 2 and song number 3, and then we're going to watch these pieces. So the first song of Ophelia: how shall I know my true love from others? By his cockle hat and staff and his sandal shoes. He is dead and long gone, dead and gone, lady. At his head, green grass. At his feet, a stone. Oh, on his shroud, white as snow, many dear flowers mourn. They go wet to the grave, oh woe, wet with love showers. So remember that. Now we're on to things to listen for song number 2. Zweites Lied der Ophelia, second song of Ophelia. Very different from the first. So I don't want to give away the secret, but I think even me telling you this, it will still be rather shocking. We finished the first song with that unanswered question, that intoning of a note that just drifts off into the ethereal world. And then number 2 makes up for it. We have no introduction whatsoever. Normally, the singer would breathe and the pianist would enter with them and go. I had to use pre-recorded tracks for this, so it was a big undertaking to get this song to line up. As I pressed play, ran to my spot and did all these things. But the lack of introduction is surprising, unexpected, and it's intentionally so. I think that Strauss wanted this to be jarring because of the text in this song, and it is very jarring. The garishly joyful and rambunctious text setting as it jumps around almost in an arpeggio style to high and low notes is jarring, and the quick pace of the song feels almost manic. We've gone from dreamlike, wonderful sort of beauty things in the clouds to a quick, almost like a nursery rhyme as it skips along, although the text most definitely is not something you would say in a nursery rhyme. There is a feeling of unsettledness in the voice as it enters unexpectedly and seems to climb higher and higher. We always think we've reached the peak of this song, but Ophelia keeps soaring to new heights and pushing the song and its boundaries even farther. The text, speaking of a young unwed maid who visits her betrothed in his bedroom on Valentine's Day, who then refuses to marry her afterwards, is quite provocative. And yet the piece somehow reminds me of a twisted nursery rhyme, which I said before. I'm not sure if anyone will agree with that, but the first time I heard it, it almost sounds like a limerick, but it's just quite distorted on either end. So it's not one of those fun songs, but it seems like almost like, because Ophelia is so innocent, it's her youth making sense of betrayed love and someone, you know, premarital sex in that time, all of a sudden turning around and having this lover shut the door on the maid and say, I was going to marry you, but now I'm not going to because of this. It's such shocking text, but the simplicity of the song and the playfulness of it, the combination of the two is quite astonishing. The piece also takes a while to truly land on any key, but especially in the actual key of E minor. It fluctuates between major and minor and feels almost like overstimulation. So I think here is where Strauss is hyping us up to see that Ophelia is really reaching the climax of her madness. I say this later, but this is the final scene that we have of her on stage. She completes this whole scene and she goes off stage, wanders off stage in whatever spirit and character she is in, and we do not see her again. Even in her death, which happens off stage, Gertrude, Queen Gertrude, comes back and says, oh, I have the most awful report of Ophelia. You know, she's died, she's drowned. It's so terrible. She shares the death with us. So we never see Ophelia again. So I see this overstimulation in this piece as Ophelia almost hyping herself up to do something. We don't know where it's going to go yet, but we know that this is getting worse and worse as she seems to climb to new crazy heights in her head, as she looks around at people in the room, as she says vulgar phrases that would never be allowed at court. We do get a bit more resolution when the vocal line ends, but again, listen to the deeply fraught and questioning motives of the piano in the end part of the piece. As soon as the vocal line finally ends, you'll hear the piano, it sort of starts to falter. It asks the same question haltingly and repeatedly, perhaps as Ophelia looks from person to person in the court and not finding the answer for which she is searching, whatever that answer may be that is driving her to new anxieties. This is the Brahms thing that I had mentioned before. Brahms had written these songs as well in 1873. So Strauss finally composed these in 1918. So they're quite close to each other. And Strauss obviously knew of Brahms. And Brahms ended up omitting any of the mention of premarital relations. He struck that from his songs completely because that just wasn't really something that was talked about. Strauss, who clearly really didn't care about any conventions and didn't want to write these songs in the first place, kept it all in. And it was quite a shocking time, even in 1918, that it was in. And some people made comments on, well, you kept it in. Why didn't Brahms? And maybe you shouldn't have this and this. Some people like to take that and say that Strauss was a bit of a feminist and using that. I'm not sure that's true because he doesn't necessarily show that in any other compositions or in any other opinions, but it is wonderful that it is kept in there as it is in Shakespeare's play. I think it shows Ophelia's insanity to the extreme, that we actually have her mentioning things at court that for a young unmarried woman, it would never even cross their lips to say anything about sex or even love. Certainly not. So the fact that it's kept in is shocking and wonderfully so. Now, just a couple of musical examples. So this is just one of the climbing lines at the very end. This is where we actually do resolve in the vocal line. You've got it sort of climbing up to an F and then coming down, F sharp, and then coming down and finishing on that G. But you see that the piano keeps going, yum ti tum tum ti tum 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 tum. It just keeps going until you'll notice these rests. Yum tum tum, yum tum tum, tum tum tum, yum tum tum, tum tum tum. Very impacting. You're going to love it much more in the piano than what I just hummed for you. But the fact that we have this song continuously moving in a frenetic pace, and all of a sudden it's like something in the machinery has broken and it falters and slowly comes to a stop. We don't know exactly what Ophelia is thinking in that moment, but it's clear that the thought that was carrying her has unraveled and something else has taken its place that is possibly scary to her, horrifying. We're not totally sure. And now we'll just look at the second song text, and then we'll go to the third and then listen. So this is the shocking text. Good morning. It's St. Valentine's Day, so early before sunlight. I, young maid at the window sash, will be your Valentine. The young man puts trousers on, opened the chamber door, let in the maid, who, as maid, went out nevermore. By St. Nicholas and Charity, a shameless sex. A young man does it when he can. Truly, that is not right. She spoke, before you trifled with me, you promised to wed me. I'd not have broken my word if, before sunlight, you had not come in. So really what we have is the maid saying, you said we would get married. You promised. And then he says, I wouldn't have done anything about this if you hadn't come to me in the night before, and now is refusing to wed her. Finally, we have that yum ti tum, dum dum dum, yum dum dum, dum dum dum. And then enters the third and final piece of Ophelia Lieder. There's a wandering mourning theme. Yum. It's beautiful. It really feels like tears or keening when there would be mourners who would weep, the beautiful weeping women. You hear this theme repeated over and over and over again, with the two exceptions in this piece. And here Ophelia is seeing her father laid out on his funeral bed, dressed in all the robes and finery, but having passed on. She's picturing that scene so clearly and can't escape from it, it seems, because we're almost trapped in this repeated 16th note triplet figure. It never lets up except for 2 moments in this piece. So it's almost like she can't get away from it. She can't stop seeing her father dead on this funeral pyre and how much that affects her. It's very effective coming out of that bright, kind of garish second song to come into this mellow, somber, mourning theme. It's deeply affecting. The juxtaposition as Ophelia sees or hears possibly her lover and or her father back and alive is really interesting. So those couple of moments I mentioned where that repeated 16th note theme actually stops and becomes something different is when another thought pops in out of nowhere. And she sees, this beard and the flaxen hair, or the young Hansel lover. Like it's really like thoughts are interrupting her mourning, and she becomes almost ridiculously happy with those things, but then immediately returns back to this somber thought. Something tries to pull her attention away, and then she still sees her father dead at the end of every one of these phrases. Very, very interesting. The distinct tonality of this piece in comparison to the 2 other pieces could imply that her revisiting this recent memory of her father's funeral is a moment of lucidness in the horrifying events of the recent past. The dynamics enliven the words as Ophelia describes her father's deathbed. He is dead. Oh, woe is not a burst of mourning or crying or sobbing. Strauss instead sets it as a more detached observation from Ophelia, almost as though she is disassociated. Again, these are my opinions. These are just what I hear in the music and what I read in the text, but I have read quite a few scholarly articles from wonderful musicologists, and there's a lot of talk about what things Ophelia might have been feeling that we might apply terms to today. And that was one of them that came up. The final end of this whole song cycle, where the voice and piano end together with Ophelia wishing God be with you all to whoever she is speaking to, whether it is people in the room or memories she is revisiting, is the very last time we see her on stage. She wanders off after this scene and dies from drowning. Her death is recounted by Queen Gertrude, but we do not see Ophelia's motivations, her decisions. Did she slip and fall into the brook, the river, as the queen implies, or did she choose to die, as later her grave diggers assert that she did? We don't totally know. There are certainly some opinions on that. And I know, I think it's quite generally supposed that she did choose to die, and the queen is simply trying to put a friendly mask on it. But again, there's so much to know and to suppose about those things. So with all of that, here are just a few of those musical examples mentioned. You'll see this is sort of the repeated 16th note moment that we're talking about. So it's carrying on, carrying on, carrying on. And then the first break in reality where she gets sort of distracted by this other imagery, we've got rests. And that is the first time in the whole piece that there's actually some space. So she drifts off into something else, but then those 16th notes start to creep back in, and she sees her father again. She's drawn back into the funeral pyre and the vision of him lying there, passed on. So it's very powerful and very interesting to see. And then this is the text for the third song. They carried him naked on the bier. Alas, oh, alas, the dearest. Many tears fell in the grave. Farewell, farewell, my dove. My young, fresh Hansel it is who pleases me. And comes he never more? He is dead. Oh, woe. In your deathbed go. He comes to you nevermore. His beard is white as snow, his head as like flax. He is gone. He is gone. Nothing comes from mourning. May his soul rest, and with all Christian souls. Therefore I pray, God be with you. So I threw a lot at you, and now I hope that was okay. And so far you've been following along. I don't think I can see the chat in the current way I have the Zoom set up, just because I'm sharing my screen, but I do hope David will give me a wave or something, or unmute if anything is not working, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the next slide, press play, and hopefully we will all enjoy the songs. Well, I see David there. David, if anything doesn't work, you just give me that signal and I'll be watching. Okay.
Everything's working, Carmen.
Okay, good. Great. You know, Zoom, David and I had a great exchange about how crazy it is. We've had to learn all of these systems and online ways. So it's been a trial, but a very grateful trial now that things have worked. So with all that information, I will let you know that normally I've performed this many times, staged outside in the cemetery for several shows back in Winnipeg. I've done it for my own graduate recital. So you're going to see a kind of black box theater is what I've coined it. The black box theater being my humble apartment with a blank white wall and a black chair. I kind of love this way of presenting art song. I think it's very honest, and I think it's very without any grandeur that normally we'd be in the gowns, we would be in the heels, but this is a different experience. And I think Ophelia would be a little bit unhinged in this moment too. So while she may be dressed in fine mourning clothes, she probably hadn't brushed her hair in a while, maybe wasn't wearing shoes. She is well past that point. So I hope you will also be gracious. I did use piano recording. It was a very interesting journey to get those things working together. But I am really excited to share these with you. So with all that education in mind, let's move on to the next slide. And I just want to make sure that we get this seen as best as possible. Okay, and I'm just going to maximize this. There we go. Okay, let's not restart that again. Whoops. Let that land a little bit. a little bit heavy. It's a big pleasure to have been able to sing that for you. We are moving on to lighter fare. But I hope some of that knowledge you were able to listen for little moments. And if there was anything you heard that we did talk about, or if there was anything you heard that we didn't, that really signified madness for you, or seemed like Ophelia was descending to higher planes that were not in her immediate sphere with the people around her, do make note of it. I would love to know what people hear in these moments. That's very special to me. So do let me know. And great, as long as we're all still good, David?
Yes. Do we have any questions from the audience? That was a fantastic presentation. It's so interesting, the divergence between music and any play, but particularly Shakespeare, which is just so wrought with emotion. And, you know, I really, the first piece of music, Carmen, that you were playing was, I mean, it was so dark and discordant.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the rests. They really make a difference. They punctuate the emotion. They emphasize the emotion. And then the transition to that faster piece was just really, really profound. Really profound.
Jarring a bit, hey?
Very jarring, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he makes use of that so well, so that we, the audience, need to feel uncomfortable sometimes. It's not always smooth sailing. I will say the pieces we're going to briefly explore that Andrew has written are much more pleasant to the ear, so you don't have to hang in and worry it's going to be so dissonant. But if there are any immediate questions, if we don't want to hold them, by all means, please ask and we can talk about that. And then I'll just share the last 3 pieces of music that we have, which is going to be fun and won't take too much time. So do let me know if anyone's got a burning question.
Sure.
Yeah.
So far, we don't have any questions. So please proceed.
That means I'm over explaining, which I think is always a good thing. Fantastic. So now shake it off. We know things did not end so well for Ophelia. It does get happier from here on out for at least 2 of these pieces. One is not so happy, but 2 out of 3 are quite wonderful and filled with joy. So we are moving on to our wonderful, wonderful, prolific composer right here in Ottawa, folks. I'm sure many of you have heard of Andrew Ager. He's just wonderful. I met him. I moved here for my master's in 2017, and luckily happened to end up as a section leader at Rideau Park United. I say very luckily because this led to a wonderful collaboration between Andrew and I and the other music director there, also Ian McPherson. Andrew just has so many beautiful, beautiful musical ideas. I personally am obviously drawn to the art song and the opera, being a singer and being a selfish creature at heart. I love that music that I get to be a part of. Last year, I believe, or 2 years ago now, time is a very hard thing to understand now that we have been at home for a full year, but we were very lucky to put on Andrew's Frankenstein again in Ottawa, and it was a fabulous performance, just filled with classic, fright, beautiful music, wonderful costumes. And I know he's got some plans in the future for both a sort of groovy 70s bossa nova style opera, complete with go-go dancing and probably big hair and bell bottoms, the whole works, but also continuing on with that Frankenstein theme, he's got Dracula in the works as well. And I love singing Andrew's works. I just think he writes for the voice so graciously. And when you know him, he's willing to take your voice into account sometimes and make certain little tweaks. So these songs that we are about to hear, fantastically, you folks are the first people to hear them, edited and completed as they are. He's had these songs out for a while, but as things happen with composers, little changes need to get made. Sometimes things need to be jazzed up or simplified. So you're going to hear the backing tracks of these as fully orchestrated Andrew has done the full orchestration of these. They can also be done with piano, though, obviously. And he's made little tweaks here and there, and we put it together with my voice. And Marty Smythe, I think I'm saying his last name, I hope I'm saying his last name correctly there, did the editing to put my voice together with the tracks and sort of mellow out, smooth out some of the edges that happen when you're recording at home in a little apartment. But you folks are among the first to hear these, so I do hope you'll enjoy them. So what we'll hear for the first one, I'm not going to play these as a set simply because they can be broken up. They're from different parts of plays, different parts of sonnets, but the Ophelia Lieder was all together because it's one full song cycle. So we're going to hear It Was a Lover and His Lass from As You Like It. And it's a wonderful celebration of pastoral spring when cold snows and rains of winter are finally done. I think a few of us got some vibes of that today as the snow melts and we can see the first signs of spring peeking through. This is the song for you. So things to listen for. And I have some of this actually from Andrew himself, little moments that he thinks you might enjoy, as well as little things that I noticed. The bursting forth of the pleasant melody and playful, frolicking sounds of happy spring times. It's just such a joyful tune. The delicate shift is something to listen for. There's a little shift in dynamics and timbre in the instrumentation in the middle of the piece that speaks of a very tender springtime love. So lots of spring is full color, big and out there, but then there's this beautiful between the acres of the rye. It's soft and delicate and kind of feels like that first little crush you get in spring. And then there's also a wistfulness. Springtime, the only pretty ring time. It's like we always want that spring to come back, but every time it comes back, we're a little bit different. And I think that's a beautiful thing that we've changed, but it's also a sad thing because we never have the same spring over and over again. And we can look back at past springs, but they won't ever come back exactly in that way. So it's beautiful, but also a little bit wistful and sad. So with that in mind, we're going to hop in and listen to the first piece. You do not have to see me yelling at you on camera. I've instead, because it's audio, paired this with some beautiful imagery, paintings from the time of Shakespeare. So as close to as I could get it. So you'll just see some nice springtime painting in here. And we'll get this nice and big here. There we go. Oh my goodness. It was a lover and his lass, but then he had no home, and then he'd not known that o'er the green cornfield did pass in the springtime, the only pretty ringtime, when the birds do sing, hey dig-a-ding, hey dig-a-ding, hey dig-a-ding, hey dig-a-ding. Perfect. So unfortunately, I'll have to take you from lovely, pleasant spring to what we have been experiencing this past winter. But it is also from As You Like It. And it's called Blow, Blow, Thou Winter Wind. And this is kind of one of those texts that goes a little bit both ways. The first, I find the springtime text, it's quite on the nose in a wonderful way. You get a little bit of wistfulness, but it just feels like the beautiful jolliness of coming out of a cold winter. This is kind of looking at two different dualities. It's a stark review of the negative qualities of human nature and reality, comparing it to the harsh winds of winter. This specifically dives in on relationships. So the cooling or the coldness of relationships, friendships, and how those kind of can be deceptive, and that, you know, the love that comes from someone or the warmth that comes from the sun is also on the other side of that coin. It's the sadness that can be caused by someone, the hurt, the anger, or the coldness of the wind and the winter snows. So I know we're trying to leave that behind, but we have to have a little bit of winter still. Things to listen for: the ethereal, frosty sounds of the orchestral track. So you hear like long, quite spaced out notes. And to me, those sound like the wind whistling through the trees when there's no leaves to cover and you kind of wrap up in your coat, but you just can't get warm. You'll hear that in the track, I think. The ironic setting of this "life is most jolly." So there's two verses in this piece. And each time we get to the end of the verse, you're going to hear this life is most jolly, but it certainly is not jolly according to the minor setting and the way that it's delivered. It's definitely the opposite of jolly, I think. And finally, how cold the music can sound whilst the speaker is so distraught. So even though there's passion, even though there's anger, frustration, disappointment, it's so interesting how the music itself can seem just chilly. Every time I listen to this track, I get that sense. So we'll hop in, keep all that in mind, and I promise we're going to end with a warm song. So we're only going back to winter one moment here.
Because
Okay, back to warmer things, I promise. It's amazing how much music can give you a sense of what the weather is doing or how the protagonist is feeling. Well done, Andrew. Finally, we are ending with quite possibly, it's hard to choose, but I think out of the three that we've been exploring together, this one might be my favorite. It's just got some surprising different moments. Andrew let me know that he wrote it for a friend's wedding, but it's just becoming hopefully a household standard. I think many people should sing this song. It's just wonderful. It's Let Not My Love, Sonnet 105, a very, very, very tender, simple poem exploring the united qualities of a beloved, and they're repeated quite often in the text: fair, kind, and true. Things to listen for here, and I promise we're almost done. This is the last thing. The beautiful simplicity of sounds in the beginning that reflect the text. The delicate change in meter and style in the middle. You'll definitely notice when this happens, just something shifts and changes. And then finally, the unification of ideas between the first part of the song and the middle. They come together in the very final verse. Much like the unifying of beautiful ideals in the beloved, which is really the whole point of the poem, is this person is exploring these beautiful things that come united in one person, and they had never seen all these three traits come together so much as they do in their beloved. It's a lovely, lovely piece, and we're going to end on that happy, positive note. So let's get there. Oh dear. Oh, I don't know why it's not playing. Let's restart that. Okay, thank you for hanging in there. I do know David said I could plug, so I strongly, strongly encourage you to follow Andrew on Facebook. It's Andrew Ager Composer is his Facebook page where you can follow all the good events and announcements. I'm very, very proud to say that I will be collaborating with him again in the future when it is safe to do so. We've all had to postpone many important things, I am sure, artistically or otherwise. So we're all kind of on hold, but there are some really neat operas coming up. And I'm sure Andrew's going to continue composing and sharing beautiful songs, beautiful orchestral compositions. So I encourage you to follow him on Facebook. And if you would like, I am Carmen Harris on Facebook as well, if you want to follow me at all. But no need, doesn't matter. I would go with Andrew first because we collaborate a lot anyways. So the final thing, thank you very much for listening. I know that was a lot of history and a lot of classical music to take in, but I hope everyone enjoyed. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Carmen. We have one question from Audrey. Was theater a large part of your training in addition to music?
Oh, great question. So yes, theater is also something that I think the institutionalized school is still trying to figure out how to teach opera singers. But luckily, I started in musical theater. So I was a little karaoke kid at age 7, and there was no opera to be heard of. Obviously, you do not want to be singing opera at 7, but I started getting into musical theater back in Kelowna, British Columbia, the Okanagan Valley. And that was the only thing I could do. I studied with a retired opera singer, but certainly at that age, you weren't going to be doing anything. So I ended up doing around 25 shows from the age of around, I guess, 8 or 9, all the way up to, oh goodness, I think I moved away when I was 18 and went off to school. So I did about 25 shows. And I think that really taught me the chops. I can say when I first got on stage for Fiddler on the Roof, I had no idea what I was doing, but I hope by the end of it, we got to things like Sweeney Todd and whatnot. That's probably where I learned the most. And I was able to take that to school, and it was very well accepted that I came from a musical theater background, which sometimes opera and musical theater don't get along, but I always had teachers who supported it. So yeah, I would say less so much that we learned the acting and theater in school and a little bit more on the street, on the stage learning. But that was a great question. Thank you.
A question from Peter. What is your favorite Shakespeare movie?
Oh my goodness. Favorite is tough. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I've been exploring all these subscriptions that we can get during the pandemic. Like there's just so much to watch now that there's these archived things. So I was watching, it was Benedict Cumberbatch. I never quite say his name right, so I hope I'm saying that right. The Sherlock Holmes, right? Benedict. He had done a Hamlet that I watched that I found very interesting, and also David Tennant. I'm a big Doctor Who fan. And these were not like, they are more of the filmed plays, but they're so engrossing, these characters. There's also, it's not Midsummer Night's Dream, but it's got Keanu Reeves. Much Ado About Nothing. I think it might be Much Ado About Nothing, which is all that mistaken plot and stuff, but it's got Keanu Reeves as the bad guy. And it's quite an enjoyable movie version. It's not the stage. It's all set in some lovely Italian villa. I hope I'm getting the name right, but I haven't watched it in a couple of years, but I would say that's probably one of my faves. It's so fun and playful, and it all works out in the end, thank goodness. Not like our tragedy here.
And and we'll go for the last question. Would you like to see the 3 Strauss songs orchestrated?
Oh, you know, are they orchestrated already? I think that's a fantastic idea. Like, can't you imagine how crazy some of that would be? Like hearing that in different instruments, I think that would be wonderful. I'm a bit ignorant on if it's happened already, because I know Strauss obviously loved to orchestrate his own music, but I don't know that I've heard them orchestrated. So maybe this could be a new venture. We should give our composer friend here a call maybe and get him to do it. I think that would be beautiful. Yeah.
Well, Carmen, on behalf of PAL Ottawa and the audience, which was quite significant tonight, we'd like to thank you for an incredible performance. It was really enlightening. I think we learned a lot about the nuances of Shakespeare and the nuances of song and how everything gels together, and that there's no necessary there isn't necessarily a right way or a wrong way. It's all based on interpretation, which makes it so exciting. Let me just get rid of the chat line.
Awesome.
To the audience, we will be sending everybody that attended tonight an online survey, which we would very much appreciate if you could complete. It's not a long survey, and it really will help PAL Ottawa. It'll help inform our future programming for other presentations, because there will be many other Zoom presentations in the future. Even though, God willing, the pandemic will be going away, I think Zoom is here to stay. So stay tuned. Please fill out that survey that you received. If you have any comments, narrative comments, just send them to me. I'm just going to type in my address. If you just give me 1 second. It's again, it's just 1 second, please. Whoops. It's David. Oh, there's no K in my name. David Globerman, and it's supporting cast at PAL. PAL Ottawa. The world's greatest typer. PALOttawa.org. Send me any, comments that you have, because those are qualitative comments. As I said at the top, this presentation has been recorded and will be posted on our PAL Ottawa YouTube channel. Please check it out, and if you like it, subscribe to the channel and click like and share, and have your friends and colleagues and family check us out, because our PAL YouTube channel is new, and it will be growing over time. There'll be some really interesting sessions posted on it. The Arts Festival that we're coming to the end, there's only, I believe, 3 more presentations. It's a really great opportunity to support those arts workers that have had it really rough since the pandemic started. And even at the best of times, I don't know if you know this, but the average arts worker is living at or below the poverty line, which is about $18,000 a year. So we at PAL have been fortunate to provide some funding towards the arts community to help them out on that. And at the same time, these fantastic arts workers like Carmen have an opportunity to share their talents and their professionalism with not just the Ottawa community, but people right across Canada, the United States, Europe, the UK, etc. So we really hope that that you will continue to support PAL. And how do you do that? You can join as a member. I believe it's only about $15 a year, which is really very little. And for $15 a year, there's a lot of benefits. You get plugged into what's happening in arts, articles that you won't necessarily see. It's very enlightening. And we would appreciate any charitable donations that you'd like to send. Whatever generosity, whatever level of generosity you can provide will be appreciated. And again, it helps us with our programming in the future. So that's about all I have to say. I want to thank Carmen again for a very unique performance on a very difficult subject. And a lot of us studied Shakespeare in high school, and this is a great way to revisit it and to do so in the context of music. So thank you again, Carmen. There will be another presentation next Saturday night at 7 p.m. It'll be Margaret Boyle, and her presentation will actually there's actually going to be a part 1 and a part 2. Part 2 will be, I believe it's about a week later, but please check out the Pal Ottawa website for information. So on behalf of Pal Ottawa, I'm David Globerman. Thank you again to the audience for coming tonight and listening. Thank you to Carmen. Be well, stay engaged, and check out opera in the future if you haven't already, because it's or any form of music, because it's enlightening and educational and entertaining, and that's what's so important in life, particularly during the pandemic, but even after. So thank you again, and have a lovely evening.
Thank
Good night.
you. Good night, all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.